Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Rangers Review morning briefing for Thursday, the 24th of August. I'm Derek Clark, and I'm joined this morning by Joshua Barry. How are we doing, Joshua?
Yeah, good, Derek. All good. Lots to talk about from the game on Tuesday, so looking forward to getting into it.
Yeah, it was a late one on Tuesday evening. What time did you eventually get to your bed?
On Tuesday, probably, I don't know. Was that your dog?
No, it was just a couple of bottles of
I thought I heard your dog trying to get on the screen and you'd stopped him. I was like, you can't stop him. I probably got to bed, I don't know, about 2:30 or something there, just pretty standard. But I always find after games anyway, you can't sleep until pretty early in the morning. So yeah, nothing new there.
Yeah, I think everyone was pretty wired after the game. It was such a enthralling contest at Ibrox, of course, setting up nicely for next Wednesday when Rangers go to Eindhoven to take on PSV. A place in the Champions League group stage awaits the winners. Joshua, we were on, of course, an instant reaction after the game. You can go and check it out on the YouTube channel, folks. You've done a bit of analysis since and had a look back at it. What's your main takeaways, and is there plenty of optimism for next week, do you reckon?
Yeah, I think it'll be really difficult to go through because Rangers didn't concede that much in open play. I think it was 0.6 or 7 expected goals they conceded in open play. There's quite a few times where PSV got down the sides, and maybe we want to talk about that a bit more, and got crosses in or cutbacks. But I thought Connor Goldson especially had a really good game, and Rangers kind of won their box for the majority of it. The only time they didn't in open play was when the ball was dummied and found its way to Sangari. I thought you could see Derek Wright throughout the game, and I'm not sure about anyone else, but you can sometimes just, I guess, see the quality of the opposition. And I thought at times the way PSV moved it when they had the space to, when they had the time to, you could see the quality of individual players. So I think Rangers did a really good job of slowing them down. I think both the fullbacks had really good games. I think the first goal was one break, really, where Rangers didn't follow the runs to kind of cover either fullback. And as mentioned, PSV with that dummy managed to get a free shot in the penalty area. In the first half, again, watching the game back, I think the Rangers just didn't have they didn't have enough passing options in the left. When Raskin picked the ball up, and Raskin is really right-footed. He never really uses his left foot at all. Barisic was understandably not getting that high because he's got to worry about Bakayoko at the other end. Sima didn't. I don't think Sima looks as natural carrying the ball on the left. I think he looks better on the right. But he's not a real technician on the ball anyway. And I thought he struggled up until his goal in the first half. And when the ball went up, it didn't stick too much. So I thought Rangers struggled to create all that much. But what they did was they kept the game level. They didn't concede many chances, and they left the game in a good position for themselves. And I think last season what you saw them do far too often was they didn't do that, and they'd make a mistake. You think back to the Scottish Cup semi-final, for example. They'd make a mistake and not take one of their chances at the other end. Win the box is a phrase that Beale, you've heard him use repeatedly. And I thought they did that overall. The second goal will really frustrate them because I thought PSV looked dangerous from their set pieces all evening. They've got a lot of big players. They scored twice, I think, against Sturm Graz from those situations in the previous round. But overall, yeah, I think that Rangers will feel confident because they'll look at that game and they'll think, okay, we played with a back four. We had space to hit in transition and made more use of that in the second half. I thought the goal was a great comparison to the first half, because how many times in the first half did Cantwell pick the ball up on the right-hand side and just didn't really have any options and had to buy a foul or produce some form of magic to get the ball out of that situation. Whereas for the goal, he had strikers pulling in different directions, 2 players in the last line. If you look at the ground that Matondo makes up, we've got a piece on him by Ewan on the website this morning. He's about 15 yards behind Teze when Cantwell initially comes away with the ball and obviously gets ahead of him by the time Dessers has put that fantastic ball in play. Dessers, outside of his 2 assists, had some good moments. I think had some frustrating moments. Natural because he's playing up against 2 centre backs and he's trying to occupy them. But again, he comes up with those decisive moments, and that's the important thing. I think while this Rangers team find fluency, they need those types of forwards to provide big moments, which they did. So I think they'll be encouraged. I think they'll be frustrated that they don't go over there with the leads. Big impact from Rabbi Matondo, which we can speak about. But generally, I thought that they defended the box really well against a really difficult opponent.
Yeah, touching on Matondo, we'll talk about the flanks shortly because you want to discuss James Tavernier, Joshua. But on Matondo, there's a piece on the website. Folks, do go and check it out from Ewan this morning. Asked him yesterday when he was on the video, could he have a Rangers future and save the club a fair chunk of cash if he comes on and produces the sort of form that we've seen lately? What did you make of his cameo? And could he revitalise his Rangers career?
I don't see why not, because there was a lot of pressure on him at the start of this season, and I think when he's come into games, he's done very well. You see the game at the weekend against Morton. I thought it was interesting the way that Rangers played with, a fullback on one side and a winger on the other. I think that's encouraging because it gives you different options against different opponents. At times, I think Rangers will need that when teams are going to have to defend Borna Barisic differently to the way they defend Rabbi Matondo. He might be able to commit two players, and I like having that option of a winger against, or someone who's a technical dribbler up against a deep defence at points. If you can get them the ball quick enough, then they're going to have space to attack. There may be still an argument that Rangers need another type of player in that kind of forward area, but I don't think Matondo's done his chances any harm. I think the value you'd get from him at the moment anyway, and the length of his contract means that it would be worth trying to it was worth this summer seeing if he could unlock some of the qualities that he has, because a lot of clubs have obviously bought him, Derek. So, there must be something there. We spoke about that after the game on Tuesday night. He's not been able to show it consistently so far, but I think if you look back to his football he played under Gio, he was often receiving the ball on the right-hand side. I think he looks more comfortable on the left. It was a slower pace of play. If you look at the type of moments he was getting on the ball in midweek, I think it's perfect for him because there's space ahead of him. He's attacking from the left, and I just think it just shows how big confidence can be in football. I mean, I as we spoke about after the game on Tuesday night, I remember watching him up at Dingwall when he went through one-on-one. I think he tried to go around the goalkeeper, and you compare that to the composure he finished with first time, because it's not an easy finish when you're going back across your body. I just think it shows what confidence can do for a player, and I'm sure he'll have even more confidence after that. So I think Ibrox and Rangers fans have finally started to see what he can offer, what the fuss has been about throughout his career. In my opinion, there might be still some value in getting another player in that forward line, someone who can replicate what Ryan Kent gave you against different types of defences. But equally, if you go back and look at that game at the weekend and the type of the tactical setup that Rangers used to get Matondo front-facing and dribbling at Morton on occasion, I think that can work domestically as well. But I mean, I don't know what you think, but if you'd said at the start of pre-season that Matondo was going to be the one who should have decided, if Rangers don't concede from that set piece, a game against PSV in the Champions League qualifiers, I think everyone would have been quite surprised.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a right turnaround in his Rangers career, that's fair to say. Let's get to it. There's lots of comments coming in with regards to him. I was really impressed with him when he came on against PSV. It leads to a bit of a debate. Does he have a part to play next week from the off, or better as an impact sub? We'll ask that shortly. Ian Ross says Matondo is starting to flourish because now that Kent has gone, he is playing in his most effectual position, which is a good point because that's where he flourished for Cercle Bruges on loan. That's what convinced Rangers to go and buy him last season. He was coming in from that left-hand side. No Ryan Kent now, so perhaps that is a factor. James Skeen says Matondo has to play a part next week. What's your gut feeling on that one, Joshua? Is it another impact sub? And it just really justifies Michael Beale's inclusion when he added him to the squad. Of course, there was a lot of eyebrows raised when Yanis Hadji was omitted, but he got it bang on.
Yeah, he did, and he got the sub, I think, bang on as well. Similarly to the game against Livingston, when the kind of pace that came on just changed the game. I think there's an argument that you don't start him and you bring him on when the game's a bit more tired, because it'll be more end-to-end then, as opposed to maybe having to sit on the last line and time your runs in behind. The thing is, Matondo is just he's one of the quickest players I've ever seen, and he and that is just before you talk about anything he brings to the team. That's such a threat for when you're facing opposition teams. You've got to be able to use that pace, and I think that's something that when I've watched Seema in the past, he's been able to, from the right-hand side, time his runs in behind well. Still waiting for him to, apart from that goal, I think, really have a performance that shows what he's all about. But Matondo's still, 22? He's had a lot of chopping and changing in his career over the last few years. You're right, Derek, he was one of the better players in the Belgian league just 2 seasons ago. Players can look very good or very bad, I guess, depending on what type of context they're in. I remember Matondo, a home game against Hearts I think it was one of Gio's last games. I think it was a 1-0 win where Tillman scored. And he actually, and Gio never really criticised his players in press conferences. And he did go out of his way to say that Matondo didn't have the impact that was hoped. And there was so much impetus put on wingers winning their 1v1s in that type of system. But when Matondo had his press conference about a week ago, I thought he was confident, and I like that, because I don't have any issue at all with players saying that they know what they can do and backing themselves. But he also he wasn't saying I definitely deserve to play. He was saying it's up to me to go and prove it. It's up to me to convince the manager that I should be playing. And there's no better way to do that than taking an opportunity like he did on Tuesday night. So he definitely plays at some point. I guess the question is, how do Rangers approach the game? Do they have a similar approach to the one they did on Tuesday night, where I thought that, again, they conceded little in terms of open play, and we can speak about that and what they did on either flank? Do they go to a back 5 and really try and protect their lead and hit PSV on the counter-attack? There will be space. I think PSV will want to settle the nerves and get an early goal, because you see it with Joey Veerman's comments after the game on Tuesday night. I think there's a lot of sour grapes there for the way in which Rangers put them out of the competition last year. So there'll be space there. I guess it's whether Beale deems Matondo's more effective from the bench when the game gets a little bit tired. But what you would say the game's tied 0-0, Matondo's coming on. I think from a PSV point of view, you'll start to question the type of space you're leaving behind because of what he did in the first leg at Ibrox.
Yeah, lots of comments coming in just on Matondo before we move on. Demo says Matondo's better as an impact sub than starting, but everyone deserves their chance. William Burns raises a point. Matondo's pace will terrify the Dutch and therefore occupy 2 defenders. Yeah, you don't want to be seeing him coming on at later stages of the game. Mark Heights agrees. Keep him as a sub. Don't heap pressure on the lad. And Dave Fulton, just on Matondo, revitalising his career at Ibrox, says, I've always said there is a player in Matondo. You don't get 11 caps for Wales by being rubbish. Hopefully he can kick on and realise his potential. You and me both. Right, Joshua, you want to talk about Tavernier. Now, there is some comments coming in on Tav already. Denzel says, hate to say it because I'm a big fan of his, but Tav struggled against PSV. And Paul McGregor, off the back of that, says Tav was so far forward and Golson had to keep covering him as his own position. You've got a view on Tav's performance on Tuesday night? Yeah,
no, I just think it's been. I think that the criticism's been a bit unfair. Reason being, I know people are going to jump on that and think that there's Tavernier being defended again. It more comes down to what Rangers' tactical approach was, I think, Derek. The reason that PSV always want to attack with a line of 5, meaning that if Rangers are in a back 4, and if you think of what Rangers normally do or have traditionally done when Beale's been a coach, they'll play in a 4-3-3 and they'll leave the far side of the pitch open. So they'll say it doesn't matter if there's a full back on the other side of the pitch, because by the time the ball is switched over to that side of the pitch, we'll shuffle over and we'll have kind of sufficient depth across the pitch that we'll have to force it backwards. And Braga away is a classic example of that, where Rangers will leave one side of the pitch kind of totally free. I don't think the game against PSV was the same as that because of the way they like to attack. Now, Patrick Van Aanholt, I think, being out for PSV helped Rangers because Dest isn't a natural left footer, but Bakayoko's so dangerous 1v1. And I think the movements you saw, and you did see when PSV did break down on their left-hand side between Lang, who's their record signing and an excellent player, and Dest, who's obviously someone who you might be playing on his unnatural side, but he's also been signed by Barcelona in his life. He's not a bad player. You saw how effective they were there as well. So on the right-hand side, what I thought you saw Rangers do was generally they tried to get Barisic and Raskin. You saw Raskin continually get back because Bakayoko can go either way. Although he's really left-footed, Barisic couldn't just show him down the line because he's so quick. And if you watch some of his goals or some of one of his assists against Sturm Graz is from going down the line. So he had to get 2 players on him. On what I think the Rangers did on the other side was they didn't want to give PSV a free pass into the front line. And what that meant was, take the goal, for example. If you watch back the goal, and we're going to have something on this on the website, on the Your Questions Answered page. If you watch the goal back, people will say, okay, Tavernier should be narrower to the back four. And I'm not saying that he had an absolutely flawless game, Derek, but what I think is important to point out is that he was effectively man-marking Lang the whole time. So sometimes Lang would go into the centre and Tavernier would as well. A couple of occasions, maybe 3 or 4 occasions, Cifuentes was just slow to recover his run. And again, that's naturally still getting up to speed. He's still adapting to this defensive system. But I think what Rangers didn't want to do was allow PSV to get 5 players in the front line against Rangers 4. And, for example, have Tavernier narrow protecting that space, but then having to go out to Lang, who could receive unopposed and dribble at Rangers. There was really limited occasions where that happened. And I think that's why Rangers looked good defensively and why they didn't concede that much. Listen, of course you're going to concede some opportunities because that's just how football works, especially against a team that good. You're trying to implement your game on them. They're trying to implement yours. But I thought Tavernier was really tasked generally with following Lang. And when he was caught out of position, it was more the fact that other players around them in this occasion didn't track their runs, whether that be Cifuentes. For the goal, if you look at how the goal comes about and how PSV get down the left-hand side, it's actually their centre-back that steps out and plays the pass and runs beyond Biscagli, the left-footed centre-back. So whether that's, I don't know, Cifuentes just didn't know whether to track him because it was kind of unnatural. PSV kind of maybe changed their shape in that moment. I don't know. But yeah, I think that's important to point out. I'm not saying that he's not made any defensive errors this year, but I think in isolation in this game, the fullbacks actually did pretty well against a team who are so effective down the sides. I think when PSV did manage to get down the right-hand side, it was more about others not tracking the runs alongside Tavernier because of his instruction to try and stay close to Lang to ensure that that Rangers didn't get, PSV didn't get that 5 versus 4 overload. I realise that's a lot of words, but we're gonna have a section on the Your Questions Answered today, which tries to break it down in a bit more detail. I just think sometimes, although yes, his strengths are going forwards, he's had a slow start to elements of this season. I think that was more of a tactical thing about the runs around him, as opposed to him being out of position or as opposed to him just not knowing where he was. I don't think that's what it was at all.
Yeah, so many different viewpoints coming in on that. Damo Fussell says he carried an injury which is affecting his speed. Just think he's got a lot of miles on the clock at this moment in time. Yeah. As Vladdy says, also given Tav's now over 30, can we really expect him to bomb up and down the pitch for 90 minutes twice a week now? I think that's a fair comment. And just on next week as well, James Skeen says 3 at the back maybe needed to cover the fullbacks going forward next week. I think was it yourself that touched on perhaps a back 5 in Eindhoven next week, Joshua? I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. I think PSV will be very expansive in trying to utilise both flanks, so I wouldn't be averse to seeing that at the Philips Stadion, I've got to say. But just on Tav, I think it's only natural you're going to slow down somewhat as you get older, isn't it? Especially if you're playing pretty much every single week, sometimes 3 games a week at times as well. It's going to take its toll.
Yeah, it is. I mean, 3 at the back. I totally agree with you. Firstly, Derek. Actually, of course it is, and I think that's probably one of the reasons that Sterling is always maybe a bit of a different right back, and we're still to see him over a number of games. He's not come here to sit on the bench for 2 years. 3 at the back is an interesting shout, but in a way, Rangers at points, they weren't playing 3 centre backs, but because they were defending with 5 in the back line, I wonder if whether they'll keep the same setup, because they didn't concede all that much. Again, if you look at the shot map, which is in the analysis piece on the website, or you can watch it on the members section, the members video in the members video in the members section on the YouTube channel. There you go. The PSV creates quite a lot from set pieces, but if you look at the actual shots they had in and around the box, it was really limited. So Rangers will presumably also look at their defensive performance and think it worked pretty well. Again, it was slightly different on either side because Teze wasn't pushing up like Dest was, so that allowed Sima to stay slightly higher, and it meant that Barisic was always on Bakayoko, but on the right-hand side, because sometimes Lang was moving in field, sometimes he was going wide, but PSV were always pushing up an extra player there. Again, in the past, against certain opposition, I think you'd have seen Rangers just really protect the centre, move with the ball, move it to either side. But I guess against PSV, I don't think that would have worked because they're so dangerous out wide when you give them those moments. I wouldn't be surprised if John Lundstrom started in the away leg, partly to protect against those runs on the right-hand side. I thought he looked pretty good when he came off the bench. Yep. Maybe the type of game that actually quite suits him. But he also would give you that flexibility of going to a back three at points if need be. That would maybe be one of my early shouts for the team. I wouldn't be surprised if it's him, but structurally, I don't know if Beale will change too much. I think Dessers will play again because he gives you a focal point. I guess the question is who plays next to him. Is this a game that suits Danilo? Do you play someone who thrives with their back to goal like Lammers? Does Matondo play from the start? I think Campbell has to play. Asked him about his favourite position in the mix zone after the game and gave an interesting answer, which you can watch on the YouTube channel. I think you can read it on the website as well. He definitely has to play as ever for me. I thought Raskin off the ball. On the ball, he was a little bit careless at points in the first half, but off the ball, he had so much to do because, again, he was constantly doubling up with Barisic and Bakayoko, but then he also had to make up ground and pressurise Sangare. And although Sangare he turned, I think it was 2 minutes before the first goal, he turned him brilliantly in the middle of the pitch, but Raskin just kept going. He's so quick that I think opponents can get lulled into a kind of false sense of security of the amount of time they have on the ball. And if you watch that goal back, the way that Sangare's receiving with his back to goal, which I guess is a trigger for Rangers to press up, but the amount of ground that Raskin actually makes up in those number of seconds, I don't think opponents always consider that they're going to be pressed that quickly. I thought he was brilliant off the ball because he just had so much responsibility to get back and double up with Barisic, but also get up and pressurise the Sangare. And that's where I guess individuals come into tactical setups, because how many other players can do that in the Rangers squad? Probably none, given his engine, given how strong Raskin is off the ball. So I thought he had a really good game in periods off the ball, a little bit loose, and I think sometimes he doesn't look quite as natural on that left-hand side under pressure because he is very right-footed, but obviously makes such a big impact for the goal, and I thought protected Barisic very well too.
Yes, and Gary, what a player he is. I don't think he'll be at PSV for much longer. There are a host of clubs sniffing about him, big clubs in Europe. So if they could hurry up and buy him before Wednesday night, that would be greatly appreciated. Lots of comments on Tav as well. We'll just get to a few more before we move on. Jim says, I think Beale will play both Tav and Sterling, maybe. I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. That could be a possibility on Wednesday. And Stephen Gillespie, I hope this is the case, buddy. We're all getting it, Tav. You know how it ends next Wednesday. Tav's goal puts us through in a tight 1-0 win. Would bite your hand off for that. That would be absolutely fantastic. Dave Fulton raises a point. Jack or Lundstrom playing in front of Goldson and Suter as an advanced sweeper. Could we see the two of them, do you think, Joshua, Jack and Lundstrom perhaps in Eindhoven?
Potentially. I have a feeling it might be one of either, if Rangers do go to a back five, it might be Sterling, because that's what Rangers have done so far when they went to a back three and started with a back three or actually moved to a back three off the ball. If they keep the kind of same setup, which I feel like they might do, then I wouldn't be surprised if it's Lundstrom. Listen, it might be Cifuentes because, yes, he got caught out in a couple of minutes, but he's only been here about 3 weeks and he started his Rangers career very well for me. Especially in the second half away in Servette, gives you a lot of security on the ball, gives you a lot of options because he's a real creative passer in the final third, but he's also someone who can be entrusted with defensive responsibility in his own team's half as well. I just think that Lundstrom, he came on and he did well. It's maybe the type of game that suits him. You'd expect Rangers to be slightly more maybe defensive in their team selection. Raskin's going to play. I think Jack definitely plays probably a lot. The team selection on Saturday up in Dingwall will tell us a lot about who starts on it. Is it Wednesday night in Eindhoven or is it Tuesday?
Yeah, Wednesday night. Do you think there'll be changes on Saturday?
Yeah, I think Danilo will come in. I think Lammers will come in. I don't know if Ridvan will be fit, but you've got to, because although I guess players want to keep playing games, you've got PSV away, and then if you're not, is it the Old Firm right after that, or is it another game? Is
2nd of September? Oh, is it the 3rd of September?
It's the 3rd of September. But yes, it is next. It is the weekend after Ross County. So I guess you probably don't want the same team playing those 3 games in a week. Can imagine that would be quite a tiring 3 90 minutes, and you want your team to be fresh going over to Eindhoven. So I definitely expect maybe Dowell to come into the team. I would keep Cantwell in there because I just think he's so important to the team at the moment.
Yeah,
keep Raskin in there as well. I'd probably give Lammers and Danilo a start as well, because you probably want to keep others fit. But I'd expect there to be a few changes while still putting out a strong team, because let's not kid ourselves, if Rangers weren't to go and get a win up in Dingwall, it would be an absolute disaster, regardless of what happens in Eindhoven. So you've got to play the game in front of them, and I'm sure they'll be focused on that come Saturday.
Yeah, they've got to win on Saturday. Right, let's move on. Just a bit of transfer news, because there is lots of comments coming in. Glenn Kamara has been mentioned a lot in the comments. Caroline says, any news on Kamara moving on? Of course, this was news that was breaking just ahead of the game on Tuesday, that Leeds United had stepped up their efforts to land the Finnish midfielder. A fee of £5.5 million being quoted. Michael Beale was asked in the post-match press conference about it. He says it's nothing new. I don't know if he was keeping his cards close to his chest, or it's understandable he'd have been concentrating on other things. But Joshua, I think that's one. I asked you yesterday, £5.5 million for someone Rangers brought in for the legendary 50 grand is brilliant business. And also, given the fact that he seems to have checked it, I don't think Rangers have had the vintage Glenn Kamara for 18 months now.
Yeah, he had that performance actually in Eindhoven last year, where it was a bit of a throwback. Obviously, in the road to Seville, he was really effective, but I don't think the football ever really suited him after Gerrard left. He signed that big contract in, I think it was the September or the October after winning the league title, and it was clear how much Gerrard loved him as a player. He was so good in that season. You're right, at his best, could just turn away from anyone in the centre of midfield. And Rangers probably could have sold him for more at other periods in his career. However, I think you'd take £5.5 million for a player who you spent that much money on and got a lot of good service out of. I don't think there's any question that Glenn Kamara will go. It's just a question of when. And if you look at the money that Rangers have spent on Cantwell and Cifuentes and Raskin, getting £5.5 million for Glenn Kamara is pretty good business, isn't it? So I'm sure if and when he does go, he'd go with a lot of well wishes, because when he was at his best, he was so good and has had some really memorable performances, and was one of my favourite players to watch for Rangers a few years ago, alongside Stephen Davis in the middle of the park. I would fully anticipate if he goes down to Leeds that he would go down and be really effective for them in the Championship and not look out of place at all in the Premier League as well, because he's just so technically gifted. Players just need to move on at the right time, don't they? I think you see that all around football, and probably Kamara's has just stayed a little bit too long. If you look at the evidence of the last couple of years, but there's no doubt there, and that's why Rangers will still get a good fee from him, despite the fact that he's not had the best last year. There's no question that when he is good, he's going to be a very, very good player for whoever he goes and plays for next.
Yeah, I think he'll do well at Leeds United. Just incidentally, Yanis Hadji reports yesterday that Trabzonspor over in Turkey have made inquiries about signing the Romanian. He is also heading out the door at some point. When that happens, who knows? But Yanis Hadji will be following Glenn Kamara out the Ibrox exit door at some point. Just one player who is returning from injury. Tam Brown says Lawrence got an hour for the B team yesterday, scored as well for the B team over at the Rangers training centre, a 4-2 win over Hamilton Accies. Great to see him back in a Rangers strip. I know we've seen him in that pre-season friendly for a short period, Joshua, but the old cliche, will be like a new signing. Touchwood, he can keep fit and clear of injuries. That's another option, another string to Michael Beale's bow.
Yeah, he's your favourite player, Tom Lawrence.
He is my favourite player, yeah.
Because he shoots from outside the box. But I saw the goal that he scored, and it was quite a classic Lawrence goal, to be honest. Very like the chance he hit the bar with over in Eindhoven last year. He is a player that's in the prime of his career, and you just hope that injury issues now don't start to keep him out the side more and more often. But he would be a big addition if you take a player like him and Kemar Roof, maybe not players who are going to play 50 games in a season, but if they can contribute, it's a lot more than last season, and it just gives you something extra. You saw the game against Livingston, how effective the bench can be for Rangers. It's an advantage they have over other clubs, but the pressure is on them to win every single game. So you need that. You need to utilise different types of players. And I think when Tom Lawrence comes back into the team, he'll be able to make a big impact. I do think he'll suffer a little bit from the having been out of it for a whole year, and everyone talking about him for a whole year. So I guarantee when he has his first bad game, the criticism will be intense. But there's no question. You saw when he played for the brief number of games he did, he's someone who is going to give you a real goal threat in the final third. He's someone who's played a lot of football, and he's someone that Michael Beale's spoken really well about, I guess, over the last 7, 8, 9 months that he's been in the club as well. So good to see him get that goal, and hopefully it's not long before we see him back in the first team.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, we'll just wrap up. Barry Kelso is watching us over in sunnier climes. Morning, Jets. Watching from the poolside in 32-degree heat in Kavtat, Croatia. Scouting mission later to find a location to watch the PSV and Celtic games in the days to come. Follow. Absolutely fantastic, Barry. All the best in your scouting mission. Hopefully you find a decent pub to watch both games. But thanks to everyone for interacting with the show as ever. It is greatly appreciated. Lots on the website this morning. Head over to rangersreview.co.uk // subscribe if you haven't already subscribed to the website. You can see the little ticker below. Lots on the YouTube channel as well. You can see that the Jack Butland and Todd Cantwell interviews that are been greatly received over on our YouTube channel from the Mix Zone at Ibrox the other night. Joshua put the Stats Bomb analysis from the game on as for our members as well, so you can go and check it out in your own time, and we'll be back again tomorrow as we look ahead to the big one on Saturday up there in Dingwall. Cannot wait for it already. Right, thanks to Joshua and everyone. We'll speak to you again tomorrow, but enjoy the rest of your Thursday for now. Bye for now.